call the work session to order. First thing on the agenda is introduction of new employees. Do we have any new employees? Let's turn my microphone on. Doesn't look like we have any new employees, so we'll move on to identify future work meeting topics. Mr. Chair. Yep, go ahead, Commissioner Gould.
With our recent talk about the new jail, or the old jail building, it got me thinking about the status of the rest of our facilities owned by the county. So I was wondering if Steve could come in sometime soon and talk about the status and outlook of all of our facilities in general.
Just any kind of, that's a fairly broad scope. Anything in particular you're wanting him to focus on? I mean, we have a lot of facilities and, just wondering what, what we could, we don't want to burn a bunch of his time on stuff that you don't care to see or hear about. Do you have anything that specific that you are looking for?
Yeah, just how many buildings do we have? What are the ages of each of them? How much does each cost on an annual basis? What's the short-term plans? What's the long-term plans for all of them? Things of that nature.
So what's the rest of the board wishes on that? I think that could be a substantial amount of work for our maintenance manager there. I'm just concerned about that, or maybe he can give us a summary of what he has handy. Is that with, and then see if you are interested in getting more information. But I wouldn't want him to spend days working on something, for just background information. Administrator Barry, do you have any thoughts on that of what Steve may or may not have had handy? Have you, as far as budgeting and stuff, what he might have already to present?
Yeah, he's got quite a bit of information. So I mean, depending on how much detail you want, he could go on for quite a bit of time. He's very organized, and I'm sure would love to talk about some of this stuff. So I think just helping him know exactly what you want to hear about, so we can streamline the time and as you say, not add more that's unnecessary, would be advisable.
Yep. I love the idea. Just want to make sure that we put some parameters on it so he doesn't think that he has to talk for 2 hours.
Yeah, happy to give him some leeway on what he thinks we should know. So
overview stuff would be great for us to hear. Commissioner Carlson, do you have?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would look at it from a capital improvement standpoint. So kind of an overall view of long range. What are we looking at? Are we putting away an adequate amount of money to replace older buildings, that sort of thing? I think that would be the way I would want to see it from a capital improvement.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Similar, like this year, we're doing some improvements on the solid waste facility building and things like that. Yep, that's good. That work for you, Commissioner Gould?
Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
they're perfect. Anybody else have any future work meeting topics they would like to add? Not seeing
One
any?
other thing was a county extension update from Tony from U of M Extension. Perhaps he could come in and let us know about some items in the news. I know they've been getting some PR lately on some programs and things. As a big 4-H fan, I would love to have him come in and tell us a little bit about the latest, what's going on with county extension.
Okay, that it? All right, thank you. And we'll move on to a historical society update. Get Emily coming in.
Hello. All right. Well, good evening, commissioners. I'm Emily Shaves. I'm the executive director of the Beltrami County Historical Society. Thank you for the opportunity to share a brief update with you on how we collect and preserve and share the stories of Beltrami County and how we've been doing it lately. Just to start with our collect. So documenting Beltrami County's people, places, and stories. So we are actively gathering oral histories for the North Country Journal, which is being revived with support from a Beltrami County Development Grant. So thank you very much. This year's issue highlights the voices and experience of women in our region, and we have many volunteers who are working right now to gather those oral stories together. Looking ahead, our 2026 theme for our exhibits and programs is Voices of the Mississippi, the Ojibwe name, of course, for the Mississippi River. This is our America 250 project, which will be focused on collecting the water-related stories tied to travel, trade, economy, ceremony, and community. We're working with the Bemidji JCs and Parks and Rec, and we're hoping to bring in city, county, tribal, and veteran partners as well. We're also preparing a nomination for Beltrami County to be recognized as Minnesota's World War II Heritage City. Now they call it a city, but it's really any location. So we're going for county. So this effort involves multiple partners, and it will require our county administrator's signature. The application is due on April 30th, and we're doing all the work. So we're looking forward to putting that in and hopefully having our name put forth for that. So under preserve, thanks to a Minnesota Historical Society large legacy grant, we've installed mezzanine shelving and begun archival rehousing to better protect our collections. So we've also digitized 70+ Bemidji High School sports films, and volunteers continue scanning our photo archives. So now we have over 500,000 images in our collection, and we have gotten about 30% of those images digitized at this time. We are working with the Minnesota Digital Library, and we have digitized the Bemidji directories from 1904 forward to the point where they are copyrighted. So we can't do any more at this point. So these are used by researchers, planners, and genealogists alike, and we're really grateful to the city of Bemidji as well for budgeting for our 2025 HVAC system replacement. And this is essential, of course, to all of the long-term preservation efforts. And so then on to share, we offer free admission to SNAP and now to military families through Museums for All and Blue Star Museums. Blue Star Museums begins May 17th and runs through Veterans Day, and that will be for active military members and up to 5 of their family members. This spring's Train Day event welcomed over 400 visitors and also marked the 40th anniversary of the Northern Iron Horse Railroad Society, with whom we have a longstanding and wonderful partnership and friendship. Our theme for this year's exhibits and programs is Empowering Women, Beltrami County's Journey Toward Equality. And this will include a monthly speaker series. Our topics so far have included financial wellness and relationship safety. Our next program this Saturday will feature women in media, and that begins at 10 a.m. One of our most visible upcoming initiatives is Women's History Period, and that runs May 26th through the 31st. We'll host a new exhibit, public programs, and a menstrual product donation drive to address period poverty, which refers to the lack of access to menstrual products, hygiene facilities, and education. As part of this initiative, we will be launching this week the Period Product Pledge, encouraging businesses, nonprofits, and government offices, including the county, to offer free menstrual products. We're also partnering with Beltrami County Public Health to ensure these essential items are available to community members in need when they need them. Aside from our programs that we are working on this year, we also support school field trips, homeschool co-ops, and we work with Visit Bemidji to add history tours to upcoming conferences. And we maintain an active social media presence where community members share stories, memories, and their local pride. So finally, we just want to say thank you for your continued support. Your $7,500 annual contribution, which is roughly 10% of our annual operating budget, helps us to leverage over $70,000 each year in competitive grant funding. And that's a really powerful return on investment. It helps us to retain staff, deliver free and low-cost programs, and make history accessible across Beltrami County. And in today's climate, your support helps to make us stable, and that matters more than ever. So we welcome your questions and your visit and your ideas. And so we hope that you'll stop by and see our new shelving or just come to chat with us about our current projects. And we would certainly love for a member of the county board to consider appointing a commissioner as an ex officio representative to our board. So I just want to thank you again for your time and support, and we are very proud to serve the county. So thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Emily? Commissioner Winger?
I have one. These films that you have digitized, are those going to be something that you sell
So
at
what?
some point at least, or?
So we have plans for, we have two plans for them. So one is that we are going to put them online so that folks can just go see them, because we've gotten them digitized for free. So we're going to put them online for free.
Okay,
And then folks will be able to see them that way. We also recognize that folks who may have been in those films or may not be of an age where they're comfortable with that digital experience. So we are making a set of DVDs. We may need to sell those at cost just to be able to make more of them. But it won't be a very high cost for them. It's going to be a 6 CD set because there's just so many films.
Sure.
But we'll have some number of those available for folks who want the DVD as well. So, yeah.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Emily? Commissioner Gould?
Yeah, just wondering, has there been any updates regarding getting any financial assurances from the city? With the HVAC system that needs to be upgraded? I mean, it's their building. The city owns the building. They keep wanting us to, chip in for that, but they got to do it. So hopefully there's some.
The last that I've heard is that they have budgeted for this project, and that it is their plan and intention to complete getting us a new HVAC system before the end of this year. So we've every couple of weeks, I'll get a call or a message from HVAC folks with a question. So I'm just assuming that progress is happening, and I'm very happy for that. So yes, I'm grateful for everything that we're doing so far. So, and all the support we received is just, it really helped to move everything along, and all these projects are coming together really nicely to ensure that those resources are going to be kept safe for a long time. So, thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, thank you all very much.
Mr. Chair,
Yep. Oh, Commissioner Sumner. Sorry.
thank you.
Didn't realize you had a
Sorry
question.
about that. I was just trying to finish writing down some notes I have. So you said the county gives you 7,500 per year, which is about 10% of your budget. And I imagine it's been a number of years since you've had an increase, or since the organization has an increase in that allocation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. How many members do you have?
We have roughly 330 members right now.
330? And the price of membership varies?
It's $25 for an individual and $45 for a family.
And I imagine most of that covers a portion of your budget.
Yep, it's all operation. It just goes right back into our operational stuff, and
So do you have a membership drive?
we do. It usually happens around the fall of each year. So, yeah.
And
And then we also do a business sponsorship drive, and we just started that. So,
okay. I'm just trying to figure out ways to try to help promote, the work that you guys do. I follow your Facebook page, and it looked like you guys had a great event this past weekend. If I was into, trains, I would definitely be there. Maybe sometime in the future. But I just want to encourage people to, if they can, maybe donate to the Historical Society. And encourage, I don't know. I'm not a member, but I would encourage others to consider, and hopefully I will get a membership application here soon, so I can join, and I encourage others to join as well. Thank you for your presentation.
thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sumner.
Right.
Thank you, Emily.
all. Good
Yep.
evening.
Next up, we've got Natural Resource Management, Revenue and Apportionment. Shane is coming up.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Shane Foley with the Natural Resources Department. Just here to briefly talk about our 2024 apportionment. It's kind of standard that we give you the presentation to see how the budget went or how the revenue went in the previous year. So our 2024 totals, we had a gross revenue of $1,560,000 some odd dollars. We had expenses of about $780,000, which ultimately meant that we were apportioned out $780,000. How this lines up with previous years, these last 2 years, 2023 and 2024, have been better than the last several years. One of the reasons for that, partly 2023 was a good year because 2022 had really bad winter conditions, so a lot of the sales couldn't be sold. 2023 caught up some of those sales, and a few of those have rolled over into 2024 as well. But 2024 was a really good year for us. So how the revenue is allocated, again, apportionment, state statute dictates how we have to give this money to different entities, I guess. The biggest portion is timber development, which in our county is about 24% of the revenue goes towards right back into the land, planting trees, protecting them from deer browse, herbicide treatments, that kind of thing. School districts get 20%. The county's general revenue fund gets 20%. County parks get 20%. The county development fund gets 6%. And then townships receive 10% of the funds. So how that actually figures out with a revenue allocation of $781,000 is timber development got about $190,000. School districts, county general revenue, and county parks all got about $156,000. The county development fund that we talked about at a meeting a month or so ago was about $45,000. And then townships received $78,000 of the timber money. So it's a good portion of money that gets spread out amongst a lot of different areas. It's something we're pretty proud of. How it broke down for the school districts, the Bemidji School District received $122,000, Black Duck School District $32,000, and Kellier $2,000. And then breaking down which townships received funds, I just did it by commissioner districts. District 1 received $30,500. District 2, the city didn't receive any. There's no timber sales there. District 3 was $21,000. District 4, $20,000, and District 5 was $6,000. Those numbers fluctuate based on where the timber sales actually happen. District 1 kind of has the benefit of having a gravel pit that a fair amount of revenue comes through that in Turtle River Township. So Turtle River Township is kind of the township that gets most of the revenue in most years, or the highest number of dollars each year.
Mr.
So-
Chair.
Yep. Go ahead,
So
Commissioner.
I see the school districts and the Grego School District isn't part of,
They are,
Okay.
there's no timber sales
Okay.
there this past year, so
Okay.
it's just zero.
thank you.
And that's all I have. Just wanted to give you a quick update. If you have any questions, I can take them now. I wanted to put in a quick plug, though, that our office is really privileged to run as a business. All of us in that office really enjoy that aspect of it and take pride in being as profitable as we can be. And the foresters and Lori in the parks, each one of them takes this very seriously. I mean, when we talk about land in a district, these guys talk about it like it's their own land, and not in a possessive way, but they care about it. And I think you guys should be really proud to have them all working on these projects. So it's been a little more stressful than I thought it was going to be with some of the decisions that come out, but I feel really blessed too to be in the spot I am. So thanks.
Thanks, Shane. Any commissioners have any questions, further questions for Shane? No, I'd just like to give you a plug. I thought you did a real good job on the timber sale that I attended. I don't know, a month or two ago, whatever it was. And I think that was your first one, and that went pretty well. The
Yeah.
bids came in good and you did a good job.
Thanks.
Thanks, Shane.
I should say, we're also really lucky to have a couple mills here. We have, and then we have a bunch of loggers. There was, at the last timber sale just a week or so ago, we had 50 different loggers that were there. And that's just unheard of in other parts of the state, so we're lucky to have the mills too.
Thanks, Shane.
Thank you guys.
Next up, we've got the shoreland ordinance update. I think Brent is gonna come and talk to us about that.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brent Drude, Beltrami County Environmental Services Department. Coming to give you kind of an update on where we're at in the shoreline management ordinance update process. Shoreline ordinance was last updated in 2006. Originally was adopted in 1992. It had a couple of revisions to it. It's overdue for at least an update. Just make sure. So we've talked about the shoreline ordinance several times in the past. This is a smaller focus than previously looked at. Seemed like the last time there was a lot of things that really became overwhelming for a bunch of people. So we're kind of focused on deleting unnecessary sections in the ordinance and unnecessary standards in the ordinance, clarifying some existing practices, cleaning up some of the confusing areas in the ordinance to make it easier to read and understand. Created some new tables and appendices just to make it easier and less complicated. And there are some changes too, and we'll go over those. The process, the Planning Commission has met and discussed the ordinance language several times. ESD staff, we created a draft ordinance based on the public or a Planning Commission comments and discussions, and sometimes going round and round and round on specific topics until we get to an agreement on what we want the draft ordinance to say. But we just held a public hearing at the Planning Commission on April 7th. And we did make some slight revisions to the ordinance based on that. And hopefully the Planning Commission will vote to make a recommendation to the county board at their next meeting on April 28th. So you'll be seeing this again here in the very near future, probably the first meeting in May, I'm guessing. So the next steps for the county board, hold a public hearing, and then at some point take action on the ordinance as you see fit. There's also a process where the DNR needs to review the draft ordinance and provide a letter of approval to the county. And then once it's adopted and enacted, the townships then will have some leeway, but they'll have some time that they'll be required to review their ordinances. That there's a few townships that do their own shoreline ordinances, so they'll have to review their ordinances to make sure they're not less restrictive than the county as well. Kind of move into the highlights of the proposed changes. Just starting with definitions, I pulled out a few. So we added a couple of definitions you can see there, and then we amended definitions for a few of those, and we did amend and tweak more than just that. These are kind of the highlights, the big picture stuff. Bluff, really making it easier for everybody to understand and figure out where the top of the bluff is, make that, it's actually a little less restrictive. Decks and patios, the big change there is just changing the differentiating feature between a deck and a patio. In the current ordinance is anything less than 12 inches high above ground is a patio. Anything over 12 inches is a deck. We're changing that number to 30 inches. That more aligns with building code and when railings are required and things like that. So making a tweak there. Resort definition changing to kind of expand that a little bit to make it easier for some of our traditional resorts that we have here to fit into that category, where they might rent out their cabins year round in the off season for college students or for traveling people or whatever it might be. Here, kind of move on to the lakes and river table. I put a picture in here. This is what an example of what the current lakes and rivers section looks like. It's sorted by the lake ID number, and so it's all crossed out because it's part of the part we're deleting, but this is the special protection list. And so if you think about how the average person would use this list and use this ordinance, they'd be looking in this to find out what lake classification their lake is. But if they're already sorted by lake classifications, if you don't know what class it is, it makes it pretty tough to find that lake. You have to look through a bunch of different lists that are not in alphabetical order to find it. Pretty simple, but it's going to have some pretty big impacts. So, like, that's the new list done alphabetically, and it'll be an appendix in the back of the ordinance. So it'll take, I don't remember if it's 16 pages or something like that for the lakes and rivers list in the current ordinance and get it down to some 8, 9, 10, whatever it is that, and it'll be at the back of the ordinance, so it'll just read easier and better. This is the picture is showing kind of the new draft use table. Really consolidated the table. There was a bunch of different sections based on use types, if it's private use, public use, and whatever, it's all just one use table. We removed some unnecessary lines, you can see there, but added some other ones, and some of those ones you don't see on there, but we added things like resorts specifically. We added salvage yards, airports, industrial. And some of those, like airports and industrial and salvage yard, we added because we wanted to specifically call them out that they're not allowed in the shoreland area. The ordinance does say, it has said forever, that if the use is not listed in the table, it's not allowed. But there have been lots of questions and lots of calls, and so we wanted to kind of clarify some of these other things. And then the last one I want to point out is we did add a kind of a catch-all to the use table where we said other commercial uses that are not listed in the table. They might be possible, but the planning commission would have to review that application and determine if it's appropriate to issue a conditional use permit or not for it, rather than us just telling people it's not in the list, it's not allowed. There is an option for a good case to be made at the planning commission, and they get to decide if it's going to be allowed or not. Moving on to lot sizes. There's two big changes. We're proposing to increase the lot size for general development lakes. Really, this applies to Upper Red Lake. The lot size right now is 20,000 square feet. If you think about it, it's 100 by 200 on Upper Red Lake, because the minimum width is 100. Upper Red Lake is surrounded by a lot of old wetlands. So you have essentially a beach ridge, a low area that's wetland, another beach ridge, a low area. The 20,000 square feet is really small. We're having a hard time on these new lots creating places where people can put houses and septic systems and meet the lake setback and everything like that. So the increase is a good thing there. And then this is another change we just made based on some public comments we received, adding a couple of sections for sewered lakes. So those are the highlighted ones. So this isn't going to apply to us in Beltrami County immediately, but it does in Northern Township. And we're adding this so that Northern Township can have their rules and still enforce their rules, so they're not considered less restrictive than the county. So we just added the standard there, and the 15,000 square foot minimum lot size for a sewered riparian lot on a GD lake. That's the Minnesota DNR minimum standard. And that's what the Northern Township has in their ordinance. I reached out to their administrator and we kind of worked through that to make sure that we weren't setting Northern Township up to fail by adopting an ordinance that had different standards. There is one change, it's a pretty big change actually, in our setback section. The proposal is to add a standard for setbacks from Minnesota DNR permitted harbors, which would be 1/2 of their normal lake setback that's required. This will really apply again on Upper Red Lake. Some of those canals and Lorraine Beach area, south of Washkus, if you're familiar with that, a lot of those lots, they can't meet the setback. They're surrounded on at least two sides by canals, and they're 100 feet deep, or 125 feet deep, whatever. The overlapping setbacks just preclude anything. Everything that they would want to do up there requires a variance to develop. This would give a majority of those lots, more of those lots, an area that they could develop without applying for a variance. Guest quarters, changing the minimum height to 20 feet from 15, removing some unnecessary language in there. Patios and platforms, adding this section, just kind of creates some additional standards, clarifies where they're allowed, how big they can be, things like that. Clarifying that they don't need a permit for them if they're outside the building setback, things like that. Solar collectors, added a section in there. We're starting to see more and more solar collectors, and where can they be put? And people want to put them down by the lake, and everybody kind of agrees that that's probably the worst place we can put them if we're concerned at all about visual and aesthetics. So came up with some standards on where they're allowed, when a permit's required, what type of permit's required. SSTS standards, that's septic systems. We're removing pretty much the entire section of the septic systems language out of the shoreline ordinance. We have a countywide septic ordinance. That's where all of that language is. Earth moving, expanded that section, clarifying when a permit is required, when a permit's not required, what type of permit is allowed. And then created a new category for the very large projects that would require a conditional use permit for some of those earth moving activities. And then the other big one is beach sand blanket changes. Recently, in the last, I don't know, 7-8 years, I've been seeing a lot of the less than desirable lots being developed. And, people are on a swampy edge and there's a slope and people still want to have their sand beach. And in the past, we've kind of been forced to give some people some permits to put new beaches in because it's allowed or has always been allowed. And what we're finding is after a couple of years, the sand is all in the lake and eroded away. And now they're having an erosion problem on the surface. And instead of just leaving it alone or doing something different. And we're finding out that there's a couple of reasons people want a beach, the beach sand blanket. They want their kids to be able to play in the sand and stuff like that. So we've created some other options, like essentially we've created a standard where they can do essentially a sandbox that's close to the lake. It's just going to be contained. So it is going to prevent erosion from happening. Created a new section for resorts and campgrounds. Really the impetus for this is changing the density standards, how density is figured out for resorts and what's allowed. The current standard is very complicated and the resort owners don't really understand how to plan for what they can do. If you imagine a sliding scale, every resort is allowed different densities based on the average living square footage of their rental units. And if they change any of those rental units, the density changes. And so their density is always changing based on what they do there. We've proposed a standard one size fits all density allowance that in the cases that we've looked at, it increases their allowed density and they get to choose how they use it and where they use it. And it makes it a lot simpler. That's the kind of the big change there. And I think this is the last one that all of our permits right now are valid for a year, for 12 months. And it's usually not a problem, but there's always a bunch of people that are asking if they can extend a permit or whatever. And we've been pretty lenient in most things, but what we want to do is we want to just make a permit standard valid for 2 years. So they have 2 construction seasons to get something done. And they don't need to contact us to get an extension or to get grace to do it, or we have to tell them, no, you have to renew it or something like that. And that's all I have for an update overview. If you have any questions or if you want to talk about it more.
Commissioner Winger?
I have one. You made reference to the deck being changed from 14 inches to 3 feet. Is there a difference on what you can do as far as a patio or a deck? As far as, putting in a patio, is that easier to do as far as regulations?
The deck section doesn't change. It's just what is considered a deck changes, but the deck section doesn't change. There never was a patio or platform section in the ordinance. So some people argued that you can put as big of a patio wherever you want in the building setback. Other people argue that putting a patio in is a structure and you can't put them anywhere in there. And so it's kind of been one of those, as long as people are proposing something reasonable, you just let them do it. What we're trying to do is create a standard that people can see. Here's what it is, here's what's allowed, and then they can make plans to follow that.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Other questions for Brent? No? I know we didn't have very much turnout at the April 7th public hearing. And so those that see the ordinance now and that there will be another public hearing coming. So once we come up with that and bring it up to the board, hopefully if people are paying attention, they'll come to that public hearing.
Yep, we'll try to get the word out again and maybe use our public information officer to get word out differently. But I know several of us made an attempt to get that out there as much as we could. So.
Yep. Well, thank you, Brent.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, we'll move on to the administrator's update.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Just a couple updates for you. First of all, I'll start with a legislative update. That seems to be kind of our constant update. Not any better news than the last time we spoke about this, but at least I'll give you kind of where things are standing at the moment. The demolition landfill legislation that was attempting to relieve us from permitting caused closures did not advance, so that's not included currently. The speed limit on Birchmont Drive legislation also did not advance, so those two are kind of hanging out there. Despite our letter to the legislature that you all reviewed and the board chair signed and submitted early last week, encouraging mandate reform and requesting relief from the cost shifts that are being suggested by both the governor and now the Senate and the House. Despite all of that, the Human Services Omnibus Bill did come out last week on both the House and the Senate side, and does include enormous cost shifts and funding reallocations to the counties. There are, as we mentioned before, no real solutions being discussed down at the Capitol, at least that we were aware of. Really, the approach seems to just be cost cutting and cost shifting. Those were the solutions, unfortunately. The FY 26 and 27 cuts statewide, just in the Health and Human Services or the Human Services Omnibus bills, range between $200 million and $400 million. And then in fiscal year 28-29, their biennium, those cuts increased to $430 million to $1.2 billion. So over that next 4-year period, this is the period we're sort of moving into. Over that 4-year period, we expect reductions anywhere from $630 million to $1.6 billion with a B dollars on just the human services activities that the state has traditionally funded or supported. So that does not include impacts that we're monitoring on other levels, as we've been talking with you about before. But before I get to that, just so that you know what those numbers mean as they translate to the county, just for fiscal year 26 and 27, we're looking at anywhere between a $2.4 million and a $4.7 million reduction on the Health and Human Services funding side. That's going to be pretty significant. And if we had to make all of that up with the levy, that would be about anywhere between a 9.3% and a 16.2% increase as things stand today. Now, of course, the legislature hasn't taken official action on all of this, so things could still change. But that's why I give you the ranges, because we sort of have a best case, worst case, even though they're both really bad cases, if you will. Looking forward, we haven't yet been able to really get at understanding what those biennial numbers for 28 and 29 statewide are going to be in the way that they transfer onto the county. So we don't have an estimate for that. But these numbers that I've just given to you on behalf of impacts to the county also do not include things like payment in lieu of taxes or PILT funding reductions or county program aid reductions, which are also being discussed. We'll see what the legislation or the omnibus bills look like on the tax side when we get more close to the end of the month. But at this point in time, there's pretty significant conversation about cuts that could equate to anywhere between 1.1 to maybe $1.7 million of additional funding to the county. Additionally, this does not include these estimates, losses of state or federal grants. We've already started to experience that. In fact, this evening we'll have to make a request to pull one of those grants that we were asking for you to approve because it was rescinded by the state. That's the Boat and Water Grant. And we're just seeing more of that. Money that was allocated or promised is now being pulled back. It also doesn't include increased costs from impacts from the tariffs. We get a lot of supplies, materials, those sorts of things from overseas. So those costs are going up. It doesn't include insurance or utility costs, wage adjustments, all of that sort of stuff. I did brief the management team at the last meeting. Board Chair Commissioner Gosvig was there. And, you know, I think the approach we're expecting, and you will give us this direction at some point in time, but the direction I imagine we'll be taking is that we'll have to look for both reductions to costs with our county budget, maybe new revenues in some way, while trying to preserve as much as we can the service levels that we have. And in some cases, we may not have a choice but to increase revenues in the way of alternative sources, including property taxes. So we're just monitoring all of this, but again, it's not a good news story. It's very concerning for us. Moving on, just talk about the Shade Store closing. We did have an event, a regional event last Thursday, from about 10 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We had about 30 booths that were set up there. We didn't organize it. Deed helped to organize that, which was great. We participated and we had several of our staff that were up there participating as well. As I mentioned, about 30 booths in total were up there overall. It seems like the event was fairly successful. There were a lot of great leads for those who are finding themselves unemployed as a result of that closing. Next up, I was going to talk to you a little bit about the Northern Township Sewer Project, if you wouldn't mind handing those out. The purchase and sale agreement is just about finalized. We're going through it in the last details here. I expect to have that on the May 6th meeting agenda. And that also works out nicely because it gives community members an opportunity to participate in the informational meeting that Northern Township is going to be hosting on Tuesday, April 22nd at 7 p.m. in the Beaux Arts Ballroom at BSU. That's a meeting, as I mentioned before, where they will be talking about the project, and then there will be a Q&A section where the public can ask questions and get information about the project. So I just wanted to encourage anyone who's interested in that to make sure they make plans for that. I just passed out a notice also that Northern sent out yesterday. It's a published notice that they are applying to be incorporated as a city now. I think some of us expected this for some time, but it's now official. And so there may be an opportunity here for us to add another city to the county. We'll have to see how that works out. Lastly, I just wanted to inform you that we have, with your permission, a late addition request to the regular session. I'll pass this agenda memo and the supporting documents. Of course, you haven't reviewed this information because you haven't had a chance. So we'll explain it to you thoroughly when the item comes up if you allow it. But essentially, what's being requested here is related to a project that you have already approved. And in fact, you approved the budget for it in this fiscal year budget. This is the Bemidji Transfer Station remodel project, and also some things that are occurring to a couple other facilities, including a facility in Black Duck. We did have a budget of about $2.3 million for all this activity that was included in the fiscal year 25 budget. The bid came in today, and it's a 200,000 plus less than the bid amount, which is really good. Unfortunately, we have 3 weeks now, just the way the calendar works out, till our next meeting. So we want to lock these prices in as soon as we can while we have a favorable bid on this. So if you would kindly consider the addition of that to the regular agenda, we'd appreciate it. And our Solid Waste Division Director, Brian Olson, will be prepared to discuss in detail what's being requested here and how the project shapes up and what it's all about and that sort of stuff. With that, the only other agenda modification, as I mentioned, is the boat and water grant that is on the regular session. I think it's under the consent item. See what I did with my sheet here.
So are we scratching just item 7L or 7K and 7L?
No.
The federal one is still on track or not?
Item 7K, the federal boat and water grant. I think I said state earlier.
You said state earlier,
Yeah, I
yes.
apologize for that. It's the federal. Yep.
So the federal one is being scratched from the
Correct.
consent agenda?
Correct. The removal of item 7K, the federal boat and water grant.
Okay,
We just would ask that you table that until we can bring it back. So that would be the motion we would request, to just table it or remove it from the agenda until we can bring it back. If it happens to come back, we're not sure that it will. And then, as I mentioned, the addition of this particular item to the regular session would be appreciated. And then, of course, you're free to modify the agenda in any other ways that you might see fit as we head into that regular session as well. So with that, I'll stand for any questions you might have.
anybody have any questions on any of Administrator Barry's topics that he covered?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Sumner?
so with the late addition, does our policy allow exceptions? Because I feel that if we're gonna stick to the policy of not including last minute additions to the agenda, that we would be make an exception for this, and if we make an exception for this, we would be allowing for exceptions for other things, correct?
Incorrect, Commissioner Sumner.
Correct.
Yeah, there are, we have it in our policy to allow for, emergency financial type things like this. And so that, is something that we can allow, but when it is relating to, something that is of urgent nature, not just a topic that we want to bring up. It's something where it's,
We have a copy of that
what is it?
policy?
Don't have one with me, but, I
So
do have a copy of it.
it'd be good and wise if we
And-
were able to pull out a book that had our county policies, right?
Well,
You know, I support this, but I can't support, bringing something up to, you know, adding to the agenda. And I get it. It's just, I can't support, you know, bringing something up, last minute, so,
and that's
and now,
your prerogative, obviously, and,
yeah. So I just want to make that, statement, so, thank you. But I would like to see that policy, though.
Well,
Peggy,
When,
go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I've got the policy up right now. I was able to pull it up while you were conversing. And it says here, the agenda setting process at the board work session meeting. Board members have an opportunity to request items that they or their constituents would like to have heard by the full board. Provides members the ability to suggest a topic and for there to be discussion amongst the full board as to the appropriateness and applicability of the suggested item. If there is a consensus of the board by the majority of presiding members at the work session meeting, the topic may be added to a subsequent work session or regular board meeting. So it doesn't say it has to be the next one. I mean, the next one is the next one, actually. So,
Ultimately,
yeah.
ultimately, our board has the authority to do
well,
what
and
we
I get the
choose.
numbers of the board, so I mean, I know that,
Yeah.
it would pass regardless, of my opposition or not, but, you know, I do appreciate you, reading the policy and if you can email it to me for my records for future reference.
Sure thing.
And in addition, if we are, well, I'll wait till everybody gets done. So, but I do have another, suggestion for the next meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Sumner. Any further questions that are relevant to what Administrator Barry was discussing?
So, Mr. Chair, I'm confused, I guess, at this point. Do we need a head nod to, I guess.
We'll get to that. I'm asking for comments on the administrator's report at this
Gotcha,
point.
I'm sorry.
We haven't gotten to the rest of it yet.
Sorry.
So does anybody have anything that the comments about the shade store, about the, you know, the legislative update or Northern Township, any comments or any questions regarding that? Seeing none, we'll move on to other business items. Commissioner Sumner, you have something that you would like to pull from consent, I think?
Yes. Let me pull up my agenda here. It was the item 7D,
So-
approval of fund balance transfer.
Okay, so we'll take item 7D and move that down to item 8A for the fund balance transfer. I believe that was from the Health and Human Services
Yes,
Department.
yep.
Uh,
Well,
From the general fund to the health-
auditor through the Health and Human Services.
Yeah, it was from the general fund to make the Health and Human Services budget whole, I believe.
Balance, yeah.
Any other changes did you add, Commissioner Sumner, or is that it?
I think I created enough work for my colleague here.
Now we'll move on. If nobody else has any other consent agenda items that they need pulled.
Well, Mr. Chair, I was under the impression that we should pull 7K. If it doesn't exist, there's no point in approving something that doesn't exist. So I think.
Correct, that will be removed, yeah, as part of the, Commissioner Winger will need to state that as part of the, change to the consent agenda. That item 7D will be moved to item 8A and item 7K will be removed.
And then, Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we add item 8B, the bid approval for the transfer station projects.
So that would be item 8B, and we would need to get consensus from the board to add that. Obviously, Commissioner Carlson is in favor of adding that. Commissioner Gould, are you in favor of adding that? The document that we just got handed out, and due to the financial implications of and the budget savings by approving it,
Um,
that's why we were adding it.
I'm leery because it's over a $2 million ask of the taxpayers and it's last minute.
We had approved over 2.3 million in the budget for this expenditure, so it's not a last minute. It's actually a last minute savings of over $200,000.
Okay, but we published an agenda last week and this wasn't on there. And this is over a $2 million item.
This would normally be a consent agenda item, just like our highway department stuff that where we saved almost $2 million on 2 line items that were on consent a couple weeks ago. So
What is the emergency? What is the
these are
urgency?
bids that are normally only held for a month at the most, and that we only have 3 weeks between now and our next meeting. So it's it would also potentially get us to be able to start these projects earlier. And by adding this to the agenda, our solid waste division director would be able to answer those questions for you. He is here.
Couldn't we have a special meeting between now and then for this item?
That would be unnecessary if we just add it tonight.
My main concern is we published an agenda and this isn't on there and now it's gonna be on there. And nobody from the public had any time to contact us about this, so,
So I'm taking that as a no.
no.
Okay, I would say that we should add it to the agenda. How about Commissioner Winger?
I agree. It should be added and he can give his presentation.
Okay, and Commissioner Sumner is opposed to adding it. So we will add it with the approval of the majority of the board as item 8B, the bid approval for the transfer station project bid. Okay, so that moves us on. So the agenda, you've got all the notes for changing the agenda. And we will adjourn until 5 PM, take a quick break here. And we'll give Diane time to get our recording going.